All right. Hello, Cherie. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Sonata. How are you doing?
I'm good. So grateful to have this conversation with you because I think Christians need to know this stuff. And I feel like in the secular world, people are more, I don't know, on it with this kind of things. I feel like in church, it's just like, save your money. I could be wrong, though. You would know. I don't know anything. That's why you're here. But I wanted to ask you this question when I have new people on. I ask them this question, and it is if you were to so, what is one aspect of Christ's character that is most has been most evident in your life?
That is a good question. Ooh, okay, so let me go to the fruits of the Spirit.
Hallelujah.
Yes, because when it comes to Christ's character, it's like, okay, that we know those are aspects of his character.
Yeah.
So I would say faithfulness.
Mm.
Um, yeah, because I was going to say patience, but then I had kids. So I would say faithfulness because, especially in the area of financial management,
mm.
because and I think and I can get into this later, but I've always had some type of financial savvy. I've even in eighth grade, like my mom would give us a little bit of money for school clothes, and I would budget how much I had for shirts, new shoes. I would go to different stores, price everything out, and then get my
Wow.
school clothes. And
Wow.
it, so I would say that's and then even with things I have like my family and uh job, I'm very intentional about things. And I can't say that I want to take credit for it, like, yeah, I do this and that, but I really think that God has just given that to me.
Mm.
Like, I don't have to read books on these kinds of things, and everybody has that kind of something that God has given them where it's like easier for them than other people, right?
Yeah.
There's definitely the gifts that God talks about in Romans. We know that, but when it comes to faithfulness, I would say that that's where I'm most like Christ's character. I'm not perfect. This is hard because it's like every area I'm like, oh, but I don't do this, I don't do that.
Yeah.
So on the whim, I'm gonna say faithfulness. People that know me don't come at me because
so
that's just so one area.
yeah, okay. So would you say that's the way that he's most shown up in your life as well, being faithful?
Ooh, that's a great question, and the answer is absolutely
Okay.
yes. And it's funny. Well, yes, because I actually struggled with doubt. I went through that whole deconstruction before it was a word,
Mm-hmm.
and I struggled with that. And God, the way God showed up to prove that He is God, that the Bible is true, that that I need to follow Him and not what the world might portray as Christianity, but follow Him and His Word. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
he really has been faithful in that and in keeping me. So yes.
Yeah. Really, really good. Love hearing people's answers to that. Alrighty, so can you tell the people a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, so my name is Cherie. I have a blog called thelittlecpa.com. That's actually my side passion. I don't say hustle because I really don't do it for the money. I do it because I enjoy it. But
Mm,
that's my blog where I provide empowering content to help purpose-driven professionals, meaning people who are trying to be good financial stewards. It's where I help them make wise financial decisions and experience the goodness of wealth, meaning providing for their kids, giving to those in need, tithing, managing money well, enjoying God's resources, those kinds of good things, not like,
mm-hmm.
the way the Kardashians might make it look. So that's my blog. But my day job, which is my career, I am a CPA. I focus on not for profits. So I help, healthcare organizations, food insecurity organizations, all kinds of organizations with tax and compliance. And I also help high net worth individuals with tax preparation, tax compliance, estate planning, and charitable planning, trusts, things like that.
Really cool. Wow. So I'm even more happy to hear after all those things. I didn't even know all that, but so glad to have you on here. Also, that you're a Christian. I was wondering if you had mentioned tithing. So we'll get into that later, hopefully. But
Okay.
really good stuff. So I know you talked a little bit about that in your intro, but what kind of led you to this profession?
Well, I did not plan to become an accountant. I said when I graduate college, I want to have a 9 to 5 job, and then the rest of my life, I want to myself. And I knew accounting was
Mm,
not that. So, but my last class in college was, I was a business major, and my last class was nonprofit management. And every single day of that class, I was so excited when we learned about
mm,
nonprofit operations, when we learned about impact, when we got to do our consulting project with a local nonprofit. It just was amazing. And
mm.
so I said, this is where I want to go. I don't know what that looks like, but I like money and I like nonprofits. So I went to grad school and I got something called a master's in public administration. It's like
Okay.
the MBA for people who want to work in nonprofit and government management. So I got
Okay.
that with an emphasis in nonprofit financial management. But it was in my nonprofit accounting class where a CPA firm came in and explained what they did on the tax side for nonprofits, the filings, the compliance paperwork, the issues you come up when you start partnering with businesses, things like that. And I said, that's what I want to do. They had an open position. So I started in public accounting and struggled through the CPA exam, but that's how I got to where I am today.
Good stuff. Okay. So so as we both know, you probably know this as well. The like in the top 5 reasons why people divorce or have the most arguments is around money. So this is why I
Yep.
wanted to have this conversation with Christians, because we know arguments affect every aspect of relationship, which comes all the way down to sexuality and not having sex in marriage because you're not on the same page about bigger things or things that are outside of the bedroom. So
Mhm.
um, what do you think are like specific conversations that should be had um, about money, like if they're engaged or dating or in marriage or separately? So like, is there separate conversations that people should have in dating, in engagement, and then in marriage? I know it's kind of a huge question, but hope that
No,
makes
I
sense.
I think it's a good question. I'll say this: dating is not always a safe space, right? When you're getting to learn somebody, you might not want to tell them you have 6 figures in student loans, or that
Mm-hmm.
you've been bankrupt before, or your car got repossessed before, right? Because if that person turns out to be not who you think they are, they could use it against you, and it can hurt. You can get hurt. So use your discernment. I'm not saying lie, but just pray and use your discernment. Uh, Engagement and marriage, I'd say engagement, when you've decided to make a lifelong commitment with something, so with somebody, nothing's off limits.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, I definitely asked my husband his credit score on the first date.
Oh wow,
Because that was important to me. To
that's
me, a credit
hilarious.
score tells me a lot about your character. And of course, if it was
Mm,
low, I wouldn't have said it's done. I would have asked why. What are you doing to change it?
mm-hmm.
But if it was low and he's like, I like to use my credit card to pay for nice things, or I, um, just don't pay my bills or something like that. To me, that's a sign of his character. So
Mm-hmm.
I that was important to me. So like I said, use your own discernment, in what you share and what you ask. Understand what you value, understand what God values, and understand where, if you don't have a clear sign of you feel comfortable or not, then don't ask it, don't talk about it until you've prayed about it and it's clear, or you've gotten some
Yeah.
wise counsel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Engagement and marriage. Engagement engagement is your planning period for marriage, right? Nothing should
Yeah.
be off limits. And I think Tony Evans, he says in his Kingdom Stewardship book, he said, we are to invest in our future by strategically operating in the present. And
Mm,
to strategically plan for your future, knowing that money is one of the main reasons for divorce, you got to talk about everything about money. And I think one way to do that is, there's lots of questions. You Google money questions to ask before marriage. You can find it. You can
mm-hmm.
read marriage books, money books, and I have some recommendations I can talk about later.
Cool.
Um, and I think that, uh, understand that money is an intimate topic. They say that if you want to learn somebody's priorities, look at their calendar and look at their checkbook.
Mm.
If you don't know what a checkbook is, look at their Cash App transactions,
I know we got
their
some
credit,
Gen Zers listening, so they
right,
might have no clue
their
about
credit,
that.
their credit card statement, because that will tell you somebody's values, and also
Mm,
show you their character. Even the Bible has 2,300 verses on money. Some of them are practical, like the Proverbs, and tell you how to invest, save, things like that. For those who aren't familiar with it, it's a parable in Matthew 25. God gives three, we're going to say stewards. I don't like to use the other term. We have three stewards, talents. The master goes away. He comes back. Two of the stewards say, Master, you entrusted me with this money. I multiplied it. I invested it. God, the master, who is parallel to God in this situation, says, My good and faithful servant. And he's very pleased with him. And then
mm-hmm.
one servant, steward, he says, Master, you're a hard man. I was afraid and I just buried the money. I didn't invest it. And God calls him wicked, and he pretty much, well, God gives him, the master in this story gives him a clap back. You should read it if you haven't. But a lot of
Yes.
people take from this is, if God gives you money or a talent or gift, you should increase it for his kingdom, which is true. But also look at the character of these different stewards. Two of them
Mm,
saw themselves as managers, and they saw the master's grace in entrusting them with the money. And
that's
then the
good.
other steward, he didn't have the right perspective of God. He called God a hard man. He said he was afraid. He was operating in fear. These are kinds
Mm,
of things you want to look at when reading the Bible, uh, learn learn about money, and when understanding that money is an intimate topic. It really gets to core heart issues, and if you don't have the conversations early, you could overlook something that really needs to be dealt with before marriage. So
yeah,
that's
that's
that.
really good. All that was wonderful. And it reminded me. So I just recently took a premarital certification, and one of the questions was, "What is your relationship with money?" And that's like that can take you an hour to just go through that one question.
Right.
So, like you said, it's very intimate, and it can go all the way back to someone's childhood or an experience they had in business or whatever. That can affect their view of it right now. So,
Mhm.
yeah, definitely. If you guys haven't read that scripture, I didn't know there was that many scriptures. I know there was a decent amount, but there's a lot of scriptures, I guess, in the Bible about money as well. So,
Yep.
um, that'll definitely be helpful to anybody who's in a relationship trying to figure that out. So, how soon do you think? So, how soon should couples start talking about their debt and like financial desires and like shortcomings?
That's really relationship by relationship. In
Okay.
engagement, it needs to happen. You need to talk about all of that. I think you
Mm-hmm.
need to talk about the practical, right? Debt, credit cards, savings. How are you going to invest money? Retirement, like things you like to buy. If a girl likes to buy her Fendi bags and her, Dolce & Gabbana, whatever, you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
change her. But maybe you can say, well, what are you willing to compromise on? So you need to talk about that. If you guys like to travel, talk about that. Talk about
Mm-hmm.
kids, generational wealth. What does that look for you like for you? Talk about parents, aging parents. That can cause a huge
Mm,
burden later on in marriage. So how are you guys going to deal with that? So just practical things, right? And then you also need to talk about the social and emotional aspects that you talked about as well. Talk about financial traumas. Talk about your
mm,
relationship with money. Talk about control. Do you need to know everything that's going on? You're going to want to talk about philosophy of work. Does one person want to work only for a
mm.
short period of years and then live financially free? Or does one person truly love their career and enjoy going to work every day? So, those kinds of social and emotional, philosophical conversations are very important to have too. And it especially needs to happen when you're engaged if it hasn't happened beforehand.
Yeah, definitely agree. And that you touched on something that I wanted to ask you about too, the control of where the money should be. And I feel like a hot topic might be in church, like, oh, like how many accounts you should have. I feel like so many different Christians are like strong on like should be one account. You're on one accord now. If you have more than one, then blah blah blah. So what do you think about that whole argument, like having three accounts or two accounts or one account?
I think the bigger question to ask is marriage exists to glorify God, right? It exemplifies Christ in the church. Everything you do in marriage, you want it to glorify God. And so if having and if having two separate accounts is going to help you guys honor God in a better way, then I think that you shouldn't stress over, oh, we need to have one account, you know.
Yeah.
If having two accounts is going to cause someone to stumble or fall, then maybe you need that joint account. So I think you need to look
Mm,
at the bigger goal there. I don't like to
yeah.
get into, you should have one account, you should have, whatever works for you. And if you need to talk to a financial advisor or a Christian financial advisor for guidance, do that, and they might tell you this is what you need to do. But
Hmm.
yes, it's focus on God and not on those little details.
Yeah. I think so many people get caught up in like what it looks like to everyone else, when in reality, like maybe it'll be more helpful if your wife takes care of controlling the finances, because like you said, you've been that way since eighth grade. So
Right.
if I don't know how your husband is, but it just would make sense that way. If someone's
Yeah.
better at it, then you let them do that thing. So yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely agree with that.
Having said that, every couple should have an emergency fund that's joint, right? And you should
Mm,
define what's emergency. So if one person loses their job, maybe that emergency fund covers bills, expenses, things like that. And the Certified Financial Planning Board recommends if there's only one earner, it should be a 6 month emergency fund. And if there's two earners, it should be a 3 month emergency fund. So every couple should have that as joint. No,
okay.
doesn't make sense to have two separate ones. And then I
Yeah.
think it is wise to have you want to have joint goals together, right? Not everything can be separate, right? Maybe the
Hmm.
things the material things you buy can be separate, have a separate account for that or whatever. But you should have a joint, if you're trying to buy a house, that should be a joint savings account, right?
Hmm.
Or investing, however you do it. Um, if you're trying to travel together, maybe save together with that.
Yeah.
Saving up for kids, having a 529 savings plan for your kids, things like that.
Hmm.
It's illogical to kind of think to have separate ones. Maybe there's special exceptions.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say there are certain accounts that should be joint, but again, the goal is to honor God.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So in honoring God, what do you think are some of the most important investments for married people to make? You already
The
kind of
most
named the emergency.
right, yeah. The number one, it really depends on where you are and where you're trying to go. Okay,
Hmm.
so that's I can't answer that as a general thing, except for like the emergency fund, like I talked about.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think a good exercise for people to do an engagement is to develop a budget together. So go through your income and expenses, see what that's going to look like, and then see how that ties into your long-term goals. And from there, you can decide what's going to be the important investment. If you guys are like, okay, we want to retire at 35 and we just want to serve God's people after that, live off
Mm,
of investment income, then your budget's going to look different from a couple who's like, okay, we want to work till we're 65, we want to enjoy life in the meantime. So right now we're not going to put so much into retirement. We're going to save up for travel, things
mm,
like that. And of course, you always want to make sure that whether you guys have a little or a lot, you're going to want to invest in God's kingdom and help the needy. That's no matter how much you have, a good
yeah.
financial steward is going to take care of God's people and the people who are overlooked by systems and governments, things like that. So, so yeah, that's what I would say. Aside from things, specific investments that God has called us to provide for our families, provide for the needy, continue to build up His kingdom, you really got to look at your own long-term and short-term goals and go from there and start investing in things that help you reach those goals.
Yeah. And I think, that's beautiful that you include the part about helping the needy, because that is actually biblical. So,
Yes.
yeah, that's really important. I think just being a giver, like the Bible says, it's better to give than to receive. So, why not use your money in that way as well? Because our whole life should be representative of us being stewards of everything that we have. So that's a really good point that you made. Also, you mentioned a, I'm not gonna remember this right, but something about a 590 something for your kids. What was that?
A 529 plan. A
Okay.
529 plan is a college savings plan. It's a college savings plan, but it was expanded about 5 years ago to include K through 12 as well. So what it
Mm.
is you put money
Oh.
into this fund, and it's invested. You really don't get to control how it's invested, but it's put into, I believe, mutual funds, which is a bunch of different stocks and things, diverse portfolio of things that ideally will grow over time, so that when your kid goes to college, you put them in private school, you'll have money to pay for it. The money that you put in there grows, meaning it accumulates dividends, interest. If things are sold, it all grows tax free. Okay. And
Mm.
then when you pay for your kids' college, you can take the money out and pay for qualified education expenses tax free. So it's really designed for saving up for education. If your kid doesn't go to college, because I know a lot of people now are like, well, will people even need college in 10, 20 years? Right now,
Mm.
you can use it for trade schools as well. So um, yeah, so it's that's one thing. Some people prefer not to save that way. They want to save in something called a custodial account for kids.
Okay.
And what that is, one version is a uniform trust and minors act account. And really what it is, it's an investment account. You get to choose how you invest the money. You can buy Google stock, or you could buy bonds, whatever you want. You choose how you invest the money. And then when your kid turns 18 or 21 or something in between, depending on what state you live, the kid has full access to that account. It belongs to them. So it immediately transfers
Mm.
to them at that age. And some people
Okay.
like that account because it forces you to save for your kids. Some people don't like it because it's not the most tax efficient account, and they don't like the fact that their kids are going to get all this money at age 18, you know.
Yeah.
So those are options. Yeah, so 529 plan and the UTMA accounts are specifically designed for children.
Okay.
And yeah, so those are
Cool.
those.
Good to know for the people out there that
Yeah,
have kids or want to.
right.
Cool. So I know you also talked about some book recommendations you wanted to make for them. So you can do that now if you want to.
Sure. So there's a good book by Tony Evans called Kingdom Stewardship. And I think that's a great book for getting the right mindset around money. It's not so much practical, but understanding how God sees you as a manager of his resources, as a financial steward, it's great for that. Uh,
Mm.
book I would recommend is Simple Money, Rich Life by Bob Lotic. Some of you might follow him on YouTube. I think his YouTube channel is called Seed Time, but he's great, very relatable Christian finance influencer.
Mm.
And I think he's great. I haven't read the book, so I say I'm ready, but from the knowledge he shares, I've looked at the table
Yeah.
of contents. I get his emails. I plan to read the book this year. I feel confident in recommending that book and seeing other people that have recommended that as well.
Yeah.
And
I
then
trust you. So.
another book. It's not a Christian book, even though she identifies as Christian. It's by Tiffany Alashay. She's known as the Budgetnista. She has a book called,
Yes. I
yeah,
love her.
yeah, she's great. And she has a book called Get Good with Money. And this
Mm.
is a very practical book. It goes through everything from savings to debt to if you need a trust fund for your kids in a very practical way. You don't need to be making seven figures to read this book and apply it. A really, really awesome book for engagement to read, before marriage or even in the beginning of your marriage. So those are three books. If you are like really struggling with debt and you need somebody that come after you and say, don't spend money on anything, I would say Dave Ramsey, but I would just
Oh
say
yeah.
proceed with caution. A lot of
Yeah.
people in the financial industry disagree with a lot of his teachings. Having said that, he has
Mm.
helped a lot of people get out of debt and use their money in a way that honors God. So
Mm.
I would say, use your discernment. Always say that, but yeah, Dave
Yeah.
Ramsey if you're really in debt and need to get out.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all great. Well, I don't know. I'm taking your word for it because I trust what you're saying. So, but yes, I know Dave Ramsey and Tiffany. Um, Yeah, Dave Ramsey is very cutthroat with his approach.
Yes.
Cool. So, is there any other recommendations or like any advice you have for people that you think is important for them to know dealing with money as a Christian?
The last thing I would say is Proverbs 27. It says, "Know your flocks." I don't remember the scripture exactly, but it talks about knowing your flocks and knowing what herds you have, because back then their assets were their animals and things like that. And the
Mm,
reason it says that, it goes on to say that know all of this because you won't be rich for forever, and you want to make sure that you have enough saved if it all is taken away, or something happens. And
mm,
that's really the heart of the Little CPA, and where I think I see financial stewardship. And so the one of the main ways you're going to know your assets is to be financially literate. This isn't like a biblical thing, to learn about saving and money and investing, but it is a part of knowing what's available to you and what you have. And I think a lot
mm,
of the issues in marriage around debt, around financial infidelity, and all of that is around a lack of financial literacy. I for a long time I was scared of investing, and it was because I lacked knowledge on investing. So once I learned about it, I started to invest. And now now that I invest, it's easier for me to stick to my budget because I have a long-term goal of growing money to reach a certain, retirement, and to hopefully provide for my kids one day. So
mm.
yeah, so I think that know what you have and know what's available to you. I'm not telling you to become a tax expert or investment expert, but just become financially literate and commit as a couple to continue to grow in that area, so that you can be in one accord and so that you can properly plan for the future. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
all.
really good. That's not all. That's all of it. That was really good.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, that's so good. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and having this conversation. Um, I think this definitely plays into Christian sexuality and relationships as well. So thank you so much for coming on. So where can the people find you if they want to follow your blog or anywhere else?
It's the Little CPA on all outlets: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, thelittlecpa.com, everywhere.
Cool. Perfect. Alrighty. So as you guys know, you can follow the Parallel at the Parallel Pod on Instagram and TikTok. Remember to speak the truth in love and kiss the sun. I'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.